Hey guys, welcome back to Mr. and Mrs. M. If it's your first time here, welcome. Welcome to the channel where we talk about marriage, love, relationships, and all things to do with faith. And everything we share here is centered on God. Today we thought we'd show our faces. It's been a while. I think the last time we did this was like in January. Yeah, so today we want to talk about something that we thought every couple faces, which is storms in the marriage. So our verse for today that we're going to use is going to be found in Psalms 127 verse 1 that says, unless your house is built on the rock, you labor in vain. Those that labor in vain.
That's true. And I think it's so important because from that verse you really understand that the foundation of your marriage, of your relationship is so important, because if the foundation is weak, the relationship is weak. No matter how beautiful or nice it may appear, the truth is that it is, at the first sign of trouble, it is more than likely it will crumble. So you really need to have a strong foundation, that strong rock built on the Lord. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yes, and when we read in the Bible about the parable, there was the wise man who built his house on a rock and the foolish man who built his house on the sand. So something you can reflect on is when you look at your marriage, what is your house built on? And a story is shared about a hurricane that happened in Texas, in a small town. So people moved into that town because they didn't want the busy life, and they would say, let's settle down, go to a place where it's chilled, where you can be by the beach and so many other things. Then there was a hurricane called Ike that happened, and all the houses were destroyed except one house. So, the media went to find out, how did your house remain standing after that storm that happened and all that? And they said that they knew the area experienced storms, so they looked for an architect who would help them to build their house and make it strong. So this is something that I want us to relate to when it comes to our marriages. We all know that we face struggles in our marriages, but how are we preparing for the storms that come in our lives?
Yeah, and I think on just working with that analogy, I think one thing that's important is a house that is built on a very strong foundation and a house that's built on next to no foundation. There can be a wind that can come in, there can be a light drizzle, there can be a light rain, and they'll both remain standing. So you'll think, we've been through this, so we're okay. But there will be that test in life. There will be that sickness. There will be that loss. Maybe the family member, someone within your nucleus of your family. There will be that loss of a job. It can be anything. There will be something that will happen that will shake the very foundation. And that's when you see, are we really built on a solid rock?
That's very true. And I think if you're not prepared, sometimes you start blaming each other, as a way to run away from the responsibility of actually facing the actual storm. To say, hey, it's because of you. You're the head of the home. How can you not have a job? Get up, do something, And sometimes, like it's saying in the verse, that there are storms that will beat down your house. Like you're going to be so shaken to a point where you think this marriage cannot survive. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about the practical ways to prepare for a storm. You can start with the first one.
Practical ways to prepare for a storm. I think it really goes back, it's foundational. Again, we're going back to that foundation. What are you built on? Because we always stress, and we're not ashamed about it, we're not open about it, that we are basically Christian and that our foundation is Christ. And we know there are people who get married and their foundation is not on Christ, but I'm more than likely they'll probably have their vows will be to do something to do with biblical foundations, those vows. But at the same time, the vows are so important, and they come from a Christian background, and having that background, because it means we're on the same we're on the same page. We understand each other, where we are starting from. We know that, look, we're in it for the long haul. It's almost like they're using the house analogy. We're locking the door and throwing the key away. There is no out. There's no option for divorce. There's no option like, you've got cancer, or you're really terminally ill, I'm out, this. There's nothing like that. You're in it forever. So then that foundation, knowing I'm not going anywhere, that starting point, then you know that you're going to be faced with some really tough things. But whatever you face, bear in mind you already vowed, I'm not going anywhere. And that then directs, how am I going to navigate this difficult situation, knowing that there is no exit?
That's true. When you talked about the vows, I thought of what is it? Mrs. Jake's, Pastor Jake's wife said that, young people are coming up with their own vows and they say, oh, when I saw you the first time, what. But the original vows are through sickness and health, for better or for worse. And I was thinking to myself as I'm sitting here, do I even remember the vows that I made at the wedding? Do you remember yours?
No, but they were good.
Like you were just looking for something that would allow you to say, oh my gosh, he really cares, or oh my gosh. Like it came from a moment of, trying to base everything on your emotions, I guess. Well, for me to just say, okay, I've been through this with Brighton. I want him to know that I remember the moments and, we'll be together. But like you were saying, that vows are important because it's a covenant that you're making before God. It's not a contract like other people were mentioning. I think we watched the same video that was saying a lot of people are looking at marriage as a contract where, if you don't like the job that you're on, you usually say, I quit. But marriage is a covenant that you're making before God, and you need to see it through, which can be hard. So my second point that I would say is spend time together. I think something that is also important is to genuinely get to know each other. And sometimes life gets so busy that you can actually find that you can spend a month without intentionally sitting down and saying, let's just chill and have conversation. You can find that most of the times you're talking about bills, children, like we've got 3 kids, we're like, our children need this, the diapers are finished, or, we need to talk to our child and so many other things. But do you still have those interesting conversations where you can just talk about nothing, or conversations where you can just talk about what's happening in your life right now? I think that is something that is also important, so that when things happen, you can be able to say, you know what, I know my person, they wouldn't do that. But if you don't have a relationship with your person, you're like kind of doubting, the things that are happening, to say, do I think we will go through this? Because you don't have that connection anymore, which I think is something that's supposed to be constant.
Yeah, I think maybe maybe putting it another way, what you're saying is, you're now married, but do you still have the boyfriend-girlfriend conversations? Because you were first a boyfriend and girlfriend. That's what brought you together. Now you're a family. There may be children from 0 to 1, 2, 3, however many, 4, 5, however many you've got. And you've got all these things, and you do interact. You've got to know that the kids are taken care of, they're fed, they're clothed, they're going to school, they've got all their needs, and those things that are happening, you're dealing with. But on top of that boyfriend and girlfriend relationship, because that, again, it's foundational, because it came before everything else. Yeah. So again, you need to have that relationship. Like talking about nothing. It's more of knowing each other as individuals, because in as much as I'm still a father, you're still a mother, you're a wife. On that level, how do we still relate? Because this relationship needs to work first, again, foundationally, before the rest of everything else, dealing with the kids. Because if we are together, if we're happy, we're all good, we're never going to be lashing out at the kids because we're having any problems. It's always, it filters down.
That's true. Where you're indirectly sending a message and you're hoping your person sees what you are saying.
I got that message.
Whatever. And then what's your next point? Like, what do you think is also important?
In terms of I think something that's really important, I think there's it goes to do with self-awareness. And I think in that self-awareness, it's got to do with understanding like your love languages. I think it's something that's spoken about over and over, but it's really important, because when you're self-aware, you understand what makes you click, what makes you tick, and then you be like, this is how because you cannot expect your other half to express love to you in a way that you want if you cannot identify it and they say, this is how I prefer to be shown to be loved. And then you're basically asking them to be, I don't know, telepathic or something. You want them to know something you don't know. So when you have that self-awareness, you know, and then once you know, you can then communicate it and vice versa. Then when I know that you want me to clean this house until it's spotless, then you will know that you want to hug me until my ribs are bruised. Then we understand how to communicate, and then it goes back to that foundationally we're talking in the language that the other understands.
That's true, and I think that you're also evolving in marriage, and sometimes you can treat me the way you treated me when we got married, and my interests may change. Like, I know when I met you, I loved flowers, and you kept buying me flowers, and I'm like, dude, like, I'm over the flowers, you know. And I guess that's why that communication and the dating is important, because we all change. Like, we can't there's a time we used to like watching series and all that, and now you can't. Like, once you're sitting in front of the TV, you just want to sleep, right? So things change over time, and I think sometimes we know who our person was a few years ago and not who they are right now. So moving to our next point, I think it's also important to know your God-given role. I think like now this whole feminism thing has got, this is from my own view, this feminism thing has gotten a lot of women to forget their God-given role, or for husbands to also forget their God-given role. And I think it's important that for the husband, he should be the leader of the home. He should be the priest in the home. And then for the woman, she should be under the husband, like not as a doormat, but as in submit to him. Also, both of us have to submit under God's authority. Like, we're not doing it because you are doing your part. You're doing it because you're answerable to God. Like, I can't say it's only when Brighton does his part that I'm going to do my part. I remember you watched a video where it was talking about outserve each other and not keeping like a notebook where you're like, Brighton did this today, so I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna cook. I want to prove a point. I feel like that's like the space that we're in right now, where the lies. Why did you laugh?
I'm just thinking to myself, if you're watching this video for the first time and you don't know our names, by the end of this video you will know my name and you won't know hers. But go on.
Yes, I've been told I say his name so much. Yeah. I like you that much that I constantly say your name. But anyway, I've even forgotten what I was saying.
You started talking about feminism and roles.
Yes, to just say we need to make sure we are always grounded by the word and we're not conforming to the world, because now it's like, you know what, be independent, do what you want. Why do you have to go back to your husband and sit down with him and ask what works for you? And I think sometimes in a marriage there can be that thing of thinking you're competing against each other instead of you're one team. And that's why even if an opportunity comes that will help your family to grow, but how come you're the one who's always getting opportunities and I don't? Who says I don't want to chase after my dreams? So I think also making sure that you're living in a way that, where everything comes back to the word. I think you talked about the foundation to say, am I still doing what God has called me to do as a wife? Are you still doing what God has called you to do?
Yeah, and on that, like you were talking about, I think earlier you were talking about that if I am out of work and I'm supposed to be the breadwinner, then you're looking at me and you're blaming me. So then when we look at this whole thing of whatever feminism, whatever you want to call it, and understanding our roles and being submissive and how the whole dynamic of the family works, there's that issue that if we understand our roles, there's never going to be, because to be labeled the head of the house, it comes with responsibility. It's not like it's all fun and games, because like we're talking about those storms that will come, there will be those difficult times, and I have to fulfill my role in those difficult times. But then when it looks like in the good times I am not given the same authority and responsibility as I am during the difficult times, to be like, whoa, you want to have your cake and eat it. Like when it's all good, who are you? And then when things are bad, hey, but you're the man of the house. Then you'll be like, whoa, there's some dissonance here. That's not working. And I think that's another storm in and of itself. So it's important to understand each other's roles, as you say, and to know that, okay, this is my place, this is your place, this is like the whole issue of an understanding submission. And I think it's also good that you are talking about it, because I think sometimes, too many times, the word submission is always attached to certain negative connotations when it's actually not so, because it's about responsibility. It's just think about it. It says to submit to your husband as Christ, as you submit to Christ. Like, so then there's that issue of, do you think when Christ came to earth and the responsibility, he had the literal weight of the world on his shoulders, and so the least we can do is listen to him and respect him. So let's not undermine that. The fact that he could do miracles and he could do whatever, that does not change the fact that he had a great responsibility on his shoulders. So likewise, that's why we talk about the submission thing.
Yeah, you're so right. And I remember reading a statement that said, if you actually struggle to submit to God, you will struggle to submit to your husband. And you talked about Christ. Even when people would come to him and say, why are you doing this? He always said, I am only here to do the will of my Father. Like, he knew his assignment. So I think as a couple, we all need to know what our assignment is. And you talked about you sometimes as a husband, sometimes not being able to provide, right? Maybe because you've lost your job. I think it goes to our next point, which is live a quiet life. People don't need to know your finances in your home. You know, if you are the wife who's making the money everywhere you go, you don't need to say, you see, I'm the one who's putting the money here. Like, people don't even need to know how your finances work in your home. Show up as one. If you're giving money, this is money from the Mtombenis, you know, like sometimes we open up a gap for people to disrespect your spouse in your marriage because of what you're oversharing. And sometimes you end up sharing intimate details that were supposed to be for the two of you, right? Because you want people to know what is happening outside. So I think it's also important to live a quiet life, do your own things. Even if you're going through a storm where life is tough and one of you is not working, people don't need to know who's bringing the money into the home. Just work as one, and I think you'll go further working as a team than working as individuals, and then you become roommates, and sometimes it's that little elephant in the room that is causing problems, you know. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about it, that you're talking about the income and all. Even the government looks at us when this is tax season. They say, what is your household income? They don't care who's getting it. There are two of you, what's your income? So if the government doesn't care what you're getting, what I'm getting, they're just looking at us as a unit. So surely why should we not look at ourselves as a unit? Because in our unit, and it goes back to those roles, it's not like if I'm the only one who's working and then you are taking care of everything else at home. That is a massive job in and of itself. So it's almost, I would look at it as we're splitting it down the middle. That, okay, what we're doing is because we're both earning it. Because for me to be able to go out and earn that amount, it's because you're taking care of my family. You're being that helper that I need, that is suitable. So you are doing that. So ultimately, what is our household income? That's what it is. And it's really that simple.
Yeah. And I guess our next point is check how you speak to each other. I think a lot of times words are said that hurt in a moment of anger or in a moment where you want to prove, you know, I am right and you're wrong. I think it's always important to check our words. Speak like husbands love to be respected. I'm not perfect at it, I'm learning, but I've learned that husbands want to be respected. Sometimes even when you're in public, sometimes you can say things that don't need to be said, or, you know, when you disagree, it doesn't need to be something that is seen by everyone else. You can always talk when you're now the two of you. People don't need to see you fight in public. Show up as one, and also make sure that you don't badmouth your spouse. I think we put something on Instagram this week to say, choose your friends wisely. We had written it for husbands, but I guess it applies to both the husband and the wife to say, choose your friends wisely, because they determine the success also. They determine largely the success of your marriage, because if you do not seek wise counsel and you're with friends who are always looking down on your spouse, who disrespects your spouse, then you're destroying your marriage. And I've found in a lot of cases that people don't always say what they're doing in their marriage. Like, they can tell you, ha, girl, don't let him speak to you like that. But when you see that same woman who's saying that in her own marriage, she's not doing that. So you also need to be wise to have a few people that you trust, a few people who call you out. That has really helped us to have friends with the same values as us, friends with the same beliefs as us, where we have a marriage ministry and people come here and we discuss. It really helps us to grow. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, because if you just think about it, why would you want to hang around someone who's saying something negative? And I think even when you're looking at counsel, it's always important to look at the results of where that person is coming from, because the person can tell, don't take that, or don't do this, don't do that. And then rather than let that person speak something that is maybe experimental and they've never experienced it, if they're just thinking, hey, that would be nice, that is an idealistic way of looking at things. Yeah. What is happening in their life? Where is the evidence and what is their results? Because sometimes you may have a friend who's single and they're telling you, hey, don't let your husband talk to you like that, and they'll be like, but you are not even married, and maybe it's because you spoke to your husband badly. That's why you got that. So, and like vice versa, like my guy saying, hey, don't let your wife talk to them, like, but you're not even married. What are you talking about? You can't speak into that. And I think when you have that again, you understand that, look, you don't let just anybody speak into your life. There should be very few people who have access, people who can speak into it. And there's, I think, maybe what is that word, discernment, to really, is this the right person that I should be listening to? Because if you just listen to anybody, trust me, it'll be your problem at the end of the day. So you really need to be careful with what you let come in.
Yeah, and I remember a few years ago when we started our marriage, where you just had this thing where you would cut out friends that didn't live according to the principles that you had. And I'll be like, dude, you know what? Fix things here, what? And I didn't realize I was the ignorant one, because you are right to say they influence how you show up in your own marriage. Even the conversations that you have, they're so different. So why would you want to hang around with someone who, is living a life that you would never want to live? So yeah, and then it goes to the next one, which is read. Maybe you can that is your area.
Yeah, man, reading is just like, for me, like, I think maybe just to give a bit of background, I remember before I got married, and I was like, I think I'm now ready to get married, I'm looking for someone who I think would be a suitable wife. And then I was just like, but you go to church all the time and you hear them, they'll be saying how the husband is the priest of the home, he's the head of the spiritual leader of the home. And I was like, oh, okay. Then I'm thinking, okay, this is the church I'm going to, and I'd like to get a wife from church. Then I'm like, I don't know much about this stuff. So, I really needed to invest myself into learning. So I started with the Bible. I started reading the Bible every day, just reading it. And it's been more than 10 years now, just reading the Bible, because I was like, at least if your wife can genuinely come up to you and say, hey, but what about this? Yeah, and there's something that is biblically related or something that's got to do with your marriage. If you can't defend it from the Bible, you have no leg to stand on. And by leadership, it's one thing, you don't need to know everything, but you do need to know a lot. You do need to know something about a lot of things. And from that point of view, and I think it goes to that responsibility to be the head. That is a responsibility. You must know, like, we're basing our marriage on this Bible and the Word of God, on God Himself. What does God have to say? So at least you must be well acquainted with what God has to say. It's almost like most countries, the president usually would have been a lawyer at some point in time. You're acquainted with the laws of the land because you're governing the entire land. So what is God's law saying? What is God's Word saying? You must have an idea. That's just reading the Bible. Then there are other things, reading about, love languages, about marriages, is about how to communicate. So many things. Just being widely read is so important, and it helps feed into your marriage because it's beneficial. Because, like we're talking about earlier, people who speak into your marriage. It's much easier to read a book by Jordan Peterson when he talks about marriage. This is a clinical psychologist with 35 years experience or more, and then he's speaking. You can see, look, this guy has been married for so many years and he's been counseling people for so many years. I think it may not be the worst decision in the world to listen to what he has to say, and then you can then decide if it's something you want to adopt. So there's listening and then adopting. Those are those stages. But being acquainted, you can't meet everybody who's the right person, but you can read what they've left behind. And my goodness, there is a wealth of knowledge out there, and it's never been easier to access. So I could go on about reading.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I remember even when we were dating and he'd be like, oh, I'm reading this book. And I'm like, okay, can you pass on the book? But the books would never be finished. But I'm happy I've learned to also adopt that, because really I think that verse that says my people perish because of lack of knowledge, I now understand it. Like, you can tell even when you're having a conversation with someone that they're so ignorant, and if they would just take a moment to read, they would think better. And sometimes you're just like, how can you be like this when you've got access to so many books? I think at every stage of life, I've learned that you need to read. Whether you are starting your marriage, whether you're having children, continue to have that knowledge, because even when you're having conversation with people, you end up having a constructive conversation and not gossiping. I think sometimes the reason we gossip, hey, what's happening in this person's life, hey, tell me, is because you are not reading. But when you read, you then challenge each other. I was also going to add and say, read on different things. Like, if you're married, look at the area that you struggle or where you have limited knowledge. Investing, finance, children. I know one thing I learned to do is I've got 3 children with 3 different personalities. 2 are strong-willed, 1 is highly sensitive. And I didn't understand that. And I started reading books on it to know how to help my child better. And I think sometimes even when your child is going through the teenage years, you never look for a book to find out what is happening to their body, So look at the area that you have limited knowledge and go and read. And now we've got access to books. Like, make it a lifestyle, not I'm reading because a problem has come, because a lot of people are caught unaware because they have not read, which is one of the things that can be a storm that comes in your life. So one last one.
Sure.
One of the last ones that I had here was go to church. Do not make church an option, make it a priority, because you need community.
Yes. Church, I think it's really important, because when you understand the foundation, again, of where you're coming from, for one thing, you're coming from a Christian foundation, and biblically we're encouraged to congregate regularly. And there is, because the first unit of community is the family, of any society is the family. That's the smallest unit. And then from there, you then have your larger communities, be it your neighborhood, be it your immediate surroundings, and then your church community. And so you find that there are ways, again, it goes to that idea of hanging around with like-minded people, and then supporting each other, encouraging each other based on the like-minded principles that you've already agreed upon. We believe in God, we believe in helping people, we believe in raising our children right, we believe in teaching our children not to do wrong and raising them this way and that. And then you're all around those other people, and then again, when someone in that environment can then speak to you and speak about you and speak around you, you get to hear the same thing, or the things that come from the same point of view. And because if you agree that the Bible is our principle, so whatever emanates, if it agrees with the Bible, then you know this is right, this is good. You don't need to think very hard, okay, this is how maybe we should try raising our kids this way. They try it this way, they do this, and you build each other. And you find like there'll be difficult times that you come across, these storms we're talking about. The church community is one of the best communities that you can lean on, and they are so readily available, because it's a Christian principle to be helpful. So then you people will be wanting to come out and help. When you see your friend also, if we've got friends who are in need of help or they are in any kind of troubles, and then we'll just reach out and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need me to do anything for you? Don't feel embarrassed. Don't feel any kind of way. Just let me know. Ring me up if it's in the middle of the night, whatever it is. I'm there for you. And you know, having that knowledge that there are people I can lean on, you feel less isolated, especially when you live out here where you've got no immediate, like our own family, like, you know, our blood relatives around us. So the church family becomes the family we are a part of and we are, I guess, tuned into. And I think it's, the importance is just...
And maybe to share from our own experience, church community has just been amazing. Like from the time we arrived here, I remember I think it's something that you also need to intentionally just pray for. Don't go to any church, but also say, God, where do I need to go where I will grow? We were starting out and we had nothing, right? And our church community went and bought like so many things for the kitchen. It ended up being something we didn't need to spend on. You know, even when we had a third baby, they like organized a baby shower for me. People bought stuff, you know, like church community really does help, but you also need to make sure that you find the right community where you're able to be vulnerable, because I believe as a Christian, God doesn't want us to do life alone. And sometimes the reason you're not getting help is because you're not opening up that you need help. So also part of growth and growing in your marriage is being able to say, we are not okay. We need help in this area. Because sometimes you get people who genuinely come to you and say, how can you help? Then you'll be like, I'm okay. That is an opportunity that God can use other people to help you. But if you're quiet and you're acting like everything is okay, you will never get the help that you need. So I think that is our last point for today. And the only statement I love that I will end by saying is, when there's no enemy within, the enemy outside cannot do anything that will destroy you. Show up as one. We are talking from experience of experiencing so many storms, and what has kept us going when the house was being beat down and we were being shaken left, right, and center was applying some of these things that we've shared today. So I believe that marriage is an institute that God blesses, but you also need to do practical things for your marriage to survive. Don't work on everything else like your career. You're willing to go and do an MBA, advance in your career, but you're not doing not even a thing to invest in your marriage, because it will be destroyed. Like the house, the foolish man who had his house on the sand. I don't know if you want to.
No, I think you just summed it up. I think it's really important to invest in this thing. This is the most significant relationship you will have in your life outside of your relationship with Christ. It even transcends your relationship with your children, because you're really only attached to your children for that 18-year period. But you're going to be there together before your children and after your children. So it's the most important relationship. So investing that time, that energy, reading, learning, finding out as much as you can and applying those things to just enrich your relationship is, you know, you cannot put a value on that. It's so important, and I think it's just really crucial.
I just remember the verse, I don't know if it's Paul Peter, that says, be prepared in season and out of season. You like saying it. What does it say?
I can't remember.
I don't remember. It says what?
I think it's...
but it says, be prepared in season out of season, because you're going to meet people who want to understand your faith, like who want to know more. So even when it comes to marriage, just, you know, be alert and sober-minded and make sure that on a day-to-day basis you're doing the little habits that is helping to build your house on the rock. I think we'll end here, and thank you everyone. If you finished the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can grow in this ministry. Bye for now.